And there's that. Broadcast. And how's everybody doing today? Thanks for coming to class. Hello to everybody. Looks like we have a pretty good crowd here in the class. Everybody, if you would, please smile to the folks at home, your classmates that didn't want to come to class today. Fantastic. And I'd like to thank my online students for being here today. Welcome to lecture number 2 for week 6. Am I evil? I'm sorry about last week's disorganization. I am really bad with holidays and knowing when we have days off and not. So I usually just get up and go to work every day. And so I thought we had class on Monday. Oops, my mistake. I hope everybody enjoyed the holiday. So anybody online, did anybody online have do something fun for July 4th? I was talking to the class before you came in, and they're a pretty boring bunch in here. They didn't do anything fun. What about anybody who came in last? Kaylin, did you do anything fun for July 4th? No. Ashika and Christina, they're actually sitting downstairs in the library watching the lecture together. It is good to see you as well. Sarah, Noko, it's great to see everybody. Beth, if you're here online, I see Landon Hauser's typing in. Hello, good to see you as well. All right, fantastic. So before we get started, I do have a couple of notes for all of you students. Writing assignment number 3 rewrites are due this Sunday by 7:10. Okay, so you got feedback last week on your writing 3 assignment. If you want to turn that in, if you got a 1 and want to turn that in, it is due by this Sunday. After this Sunday, I will no longer accept rewrites for assignment number 3. Assignment number 1 and number 2, rewrites are no longer possible for those two. But rewrite for assignment number 3 is due this Sunday if you have to rewrite it. I don't remember what you got, but if anybody got a 1 and need to rewrite it, assignment number 3 is due. Sorry, I didn't mean to make you guilty by looking at you as you came in. Torrance just came in, so we can now get class started. Okay, writing number 4 will be graded by this Sunday. Come hell or high water, I plan on spending a couple of long days grading the 85 or so assignments that I've got from the 2 classes. Writing assignment feedback will be done. Now, after that, we will be through week 5. You will have had enough time to make attendance points to get an A in this class, and we will have had 4 writing assignments, which is enough writing assignments to make an A in this class. So what I'm going to do on Sunday, or whenever I finish the grades, is I'm going to go through and I'm going to update your current grade in this class. So based on what you've done. So for example, if you've got 95s or better on all of your writing, on all of your homeworks, if you've got 15 collaboration points, and if you've got 2s on 4 writing assignments, your current grade will already be an A in this class. If you've got all your homework assignments done, but you've only done 2 writing assignments, your grade will be a B. All right, does that make sense? So what I want to do is give you a little feedback on Sunday so that you'll know where you stand in this class and if you have to do more work. Is that cool? Yes? Smile at me? Okay, fantastic. Okay, your current grade in this class will be posted by Sunday, 7:10. And remember, if you want to make a C in this class, there are some of you who have not turned in any writing assignments yet. I'm assuming that you're cool with making a C in this class. That's cool, but in order to make a C in this class, you must attempt at least 1 writing assignment. Okay, so if you haven't turned in a writing assignment yet, you have 2 more chances, the one due this weekend and the one that's due next weekend. All right? Do I have any questions from the folks at home? Do I have any questions from the students in the classroom? No. Fantastic. Let's see what we got. All right. Nothing. Fantastic. Well, this week we're talking about personality and social psychology. The title, the concept behind this week's lecture is Am I Evil? And we're going to ask the question, and I think you ought to be thinking about it, are people inherently good or are they inherently bad? Some days, depending upon what happens to me at the drive-thru or driving down the highway, I think that people are inherently evil. And sometimes I think that people are inherently good. Now, remember, all psychology starts from philosophical or religious debates. And in fact, you can think about this question of whether or not people are good or evil as one of the oldest philosophical questions. Now, thank you very much, Bradley, for pointing out an old religious system. What was it called again, Bradley? Legalism. Legalism, Chinese philosophy basically said you needed strong laws because people, let me read this quote here. Because the legalists advocated a government by a system of laws that rigidly described punishments and rewards. They stressed the direction of all human activity. Let's see. Where did they say? Human beings are inherently selfish and short-sighted. If you look in the Bible, you will see in Genesis, God throws Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden because Adam takes a bite from the fruit of knowledge, right? And that's where original sin is born. I don't know if any of you folks have ever heard of Thomas Hobbes, as 18th century philosopher. He wrote a book called Leviathan. And he, like the Confucians, said we needed strong laws because people were basically monsters out to destroy and rob and pillage the world. So a lot of philosophers think that people are inherently bad. There are other people who like to think of human beings as inherently good. What we're going to do today is we're going to answer that question as we talk about the psychodynamic perspective in Sigmund Freud and the social sciences, the social psychological perspective that I come from, okay? So that's sort of the point of today's lecture. There you go. Oops, and I didn't have this beautiful picture up here while I was talking. Am I evil? Hi, Mariana. Good to see you. Thanks for coming today. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to be talking about chapters 11 and 12 today. Chapter 11 is personality. Chapter 13 is going to be social psychology. So we're going to talk about personality and social psychology. Now, personality. Each and every one of you has a type of joke that you laugh at, a type of joke that you don't laugh at. Some of you have different senses of humor. Some of you are anxious and uptight. Some of you are calm. Some of you are extroverted. We all have these individual ways that we respond to environmental stimulation. The difference in how me and Torrance respond to the same stimulus is personality. So William tells us a joke. I laugh at it. Torrance doesn't laugh at it. The reason that we differ in our behavior is based upon our personality. Personality, as defined by your textbook and by most social psychologists, is the relatively stable set of thoughts, behaviors, and emotional response that characterize you and make you unique from all other people, okay? It's the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you behave characteristically. Now, this is different than emotion or mood. Those things are very, very temporary. An anxious mood comes in and it goes away, right? An anxious emotion comes in and it goes away. An anxious personality stays. So we're talking about the characteristic way that you always respond to things. Can anybody tell me, do we have any extroverts here? Do we have any extroverts in the class? You're an extroverted person? So tell me a little bit about yourself. Why do you consider yourself an extroverted person? Torrance, by the way, we're talking to Torrance.
Because I can talk to most people about most things, and I generally want to talk to them.
Okay.
I feel comfortable when it's too quiet for too long.
Absolutely, absolutely. Do we have any shy people in here? If you're shy, raise your hand. Of course they can't raise their hand, they're shy, right? Okay, very good. Thank you very much. We do have one shy. You want to stand up and talk to us? I'm good. Yeah, see, there you go. That's your shy person right there. Okay, now, why is personality important? It allows us to understand our behavior. I know why I act like that at the fast food restaurant. I have an impatient personality style. I'm an anxious personality style. It allows us to predict other people's behavior. Hey, should we invite Torrance to go to the concert with us? Yeah, he's an extroverted kind of guy. He'd be a lot of fun, right? On the other hand, Logan, is it right? Yeah. Logan, should we invite Logan to the party? Nah, dude, he's too quiet. He won't be any fun, right? And it also allows us to predict our future behavior. I know that maybe I can tease you and you'll deal with it okay, but maybe I won't do it because you won't deal with it okay. So personality is very important because as we know about personality, it allows us to create a world where we can function effectively and where we can have successful interactions with other people. Now, what kinds of things are personality people interested in? Number one, they're interested in how we define the self, what it means to have a self. If you think about it, your self is imaginary. It's something you made up. It's a set of beliefs that you have about who you are. Torrance says he's extroverted. Logan says he's shy. I say I'm neurotic and have a bad temper, right? So that's how we choose to define ourselves. And the crazy thing about the self is sometimes who you are can be completely different from who you think you are. Have you ever met a person who's not very confident of themselves, but they're really, really good? You ever seen somebody who's very attractive, but they say, I'm ugly and nobody likes me? A lot of times people's self-definition can be completely different from who they are. Personality psychologists are interested in how we define our sense of self. And they're also interested in talking about how personality develops. Where does it come from? Why do you get to be an extrovert or a neurotic personality? Where exactly does personality come from? And then there's a group of people who are interested in measuring what personality looks like. And these are three different groups of personality psychologists, and they do completely different things. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about that today. If we could, what I really want to do is introduce this one person to you. His name is Sigmund Freud. Now, here's the deal. His theory hasn't really been borne out by a lot of research data. What I'm doing is I'm presenting this more. Some of his points really make sense and have been borne out, but a lot of his details kind of have been laughed at, and some people even suggest he's a con man. People call him an intellectual genius, and other people call him a con man. Okay, but he was really the first rock star psychologist, the first psychologist to gain international fame. He was the first person to suggest a theory for how people developed from infants to adults. Before him, nobody had even thought about developmental psychology. He was the first person to develop a huge theory of personality, of psychological disorders. He was like the first clinical psychologist, really, if you will. Very, very important historical figure, and he founded an approach of psychology that became known as the psychodynamic approach. And what these people argued was that when you really want to understand people, what you have to do is you have to understand the dynamic forces that are going on in their mind. How many of you have conflicting feelings? You want to do this, but you know you need to do this. Do any of you ever feel a sense of conflict in your life? Absolutely. Okay, that's psychodynamic conflict, if you will. And Freud, in his group, argued that human beings have these innate needs, okay? Think of a need as an instinct with a cognitive label, okay? So we have the instinct to eat, all right? But when you talk about that, you don't say, I have an instinct to eat. You say, dude, I'm starving. I'd love to eat. you sort of give a cognitive bent to that physiological response. And in a sense, you can think of a need as the psychological component for some sort of biological thing that you have to have. Sigmund Freud argued that human beings are all animals. We are all animals driven by instincts. And he argued we turn these instincts into cognitive things we call needs. Now, what is an instinct that an animal has? An animal needs to eat, an animal needs to drink, an animal needs to avoid threats, and most importantly, Freud said an animal needs to procreate. It needs to have more animals, otherwise that species will become extinct. Now, he argued that this desire for sex, this instinct for sex, becomes the foundation for our personality. Why not the instinct for food? Why not the instinct for water? Well, because here's the deal. There's usually no conflict about when you fulfill those needs. You can eat anytime you want, William. Nobody's going to say you shouldn't do that, okay? You can have a drink anytime you want, Mariana. If you're thirsty, you can just grab that bottle right there. Nobody's going to judge you at all. You can feel that instinct whenever you want. And so it doesn't have any, you don't think about it. On the other hand, there are very specific rules about sex, how you can fulfill that instinct, when you can do it, who you can do it with, where you can do it. There are tons and tons of rules that limit your ability to exercise that instinctual feel that you have born inside you, right? And so he argued the conflict between this instinctual desire and society's rules caused conflict, and this led to our personality, and our whole personality is directed towards resolving this conflict so we can get what we want, sex, without getting in trouble, society, right? And so he argued that through this, our personality develops to manage this conflict. Every person is nothing but a ball of conflict, according to the psychodynamic therapists, okay? Now, Freud argued that we're all born with this instinct. You have the instinct to drink water. You have the instinct to eat food. You have the instinct to run away from things that will kill you. You also are born with the instinct for sex, the sexual instinct. He called it libido. Anybody ever heard that term before? Freud popularized that term. You're using a Freudian term. Now, he argued it was part of a larger instinct called eros, the life-giving instinct, but he argued this libido was a very special instinct. It's in your body when you're born, okay, but you don't have mature sexual organs at that point. So although this instinct's there, it's not mature. And so he argued that for an infant, sucking their thumb the first year of life was kind of like a libidinal instinct. And he argued that instinctual energy moved around the body in a developmentally appropriate way, and you learned how to control your impulses. Now, he argued that all of us are born with this thing called the id. It's our animal part of our personality. It's your instinctual desire. The id doesn't know anything except what it wants. It wants satisfaction. Okay? Now, he argued in the first several years of your life, you don't really think about this desire, but it drives you. But during the first couple of years of your life, 5 to 6 years, your parents make you feel bad sometimes about your instincts. Okay? So, I don't even want to get into the details of the theory because it's so freaking weird. But he argued that sometimes potty training was sort of a psychosexual instinct. And your parents get mad at you when you poop in your pants, okay? When you experience that. Anybody ever, I hate to be gross, but you know when you have to go to the bathroom and you've been holding it and you sit down and you finish and you're like, oh, that's great. That's that relief. That, in a sense, Freud would argue was libidinal energy as a kid. And he argued that we learn to hold that until our parents tell us it's okay to go to the bathroom. So he argued that the whole time in our life, the early years of our life, we have this conflict between the things we want to do and our parents telling us not to do these things. Now, about the age of 5 or 6, he argued every little boy develops his first sexual crush. And since the only female around you during that time is your mom, he argued that every little boy developed a sexual attraction towards their mom and a fear that their dad was going to find out, and he gets kind of weird, and cut their penis off. And he argued this castration anxiety, please don't write that down because that will not be on the test. He argued that castration anxiety caused us to feel this incredible sense of guilt. And this is the root of our superego or our conscience. So you know the part of you that keeps you from doing things you shouldn't do, your conscience? Freudians would call that your superego, and they argued that that occurred because you were so incredibly ashamed about being sexually attracted towards your mom. Now, notice I said nothing about females, right? And having a sexual attraction towards your father. Freud actually was sort of a very sexist person. He argued that female sexuality was just a twisted, limited version of male sexuality. Very bizarre theory. And he argued that women had this secret jealousy that they didn't have a penis. He called this penis envy. And he argued that this penis envy is what drove women to have babies. He argues, you say to yourself, I can't have a penis, but you can't have a baby. Kind of twisted and weird, right? But what I don't want you to think too much about the penis envy or the anus or this or that. But what I want you to appreciate is he argued you're a ball of this conflict, these desires, these animalistic desires, and you're having to control them. Now, you got your id, which is your instinct. You don't think much about that. Most of us don't think about why we're ashamed, so you don't think about your superego, but there's a part of you that is consciously aware. He called this the ego, and he argued this was the part of our personality. Its sole job is to keep the superego happy and the id happy at the same time. So its job is to say, how can I fulfill my desires without feeling bad about myself? How many of you make that daily decision, right? How many times do you say, wow, I'd like to do this, but I'm going to feel really ashamed if I do this kind of thing? And sometimes you still do it, right? But you have this push and pull between your sense of shame and your sense of desire. And he argued that your ego was responsible for managing that. Now, Freud thought that this builds up pressure in our personality every day. And so when somebody wanted to know, Freud spent a lot of time looking at people's dreams because he believed that when you went to sleep at night, your superego would take a break. And when your superego takes a break, your id can come out and experience all its desires without feeling bad about itself. How many of you have ever had a dream where you've done something bad? How many of you have ever had a dream about somebody else's boyfriend or girlfriend, or maybe stealing, or maybe killing somebody? Freud would argue that when you go to sleep at night, your superego relaxes, and all of these terrible, monstrous desires you have come out. You dream about them, and then all that energy is gone. And when you wake up in the morning, you feel more relaxed, okay? Right? So here's the deal. My brother's married to an attractive lady, right? Ha ha ha. And she's super duper attractive. But you know what? I feel shame every time I think about things with her. But I go to sleep at night and sometimes I dream about washing her car. You know what I mean? And sometimes I'm washing her bumpers and putting stuff in her tailpipe and her gas tank, right? And I'm having all these horrible dreams. But then I wake up in the morning and I've got all those nasty impulses out of me and I feel better. And Freud argued that that's what personality was. He argued war. He argued sports. These were all times when we got the energy of these libidinal desires out. According to a Freudian, what you need to do is if you go kick a wall, beat on something for 30 minutes, you'll get all of your anger and your id energy out, and you'll feel relaxed. And there were some people who used to think that if you watch a dangerous, a violent movie, the violence in the movie sort of releases that inner pressure for you. And so his model was about us being these animals and trying to strive to get what we want without feeling guilty about ourselves. So according to the psychodynamic perspective, we're all nothing but a ball of conflictual desires. Now, I mentioned this earlier to you when we were talking about needs-based theories. I argued that Freud thought the greatest human need was for sex. Alfred Adler thought the greatest human need was for power. Karen Horney thought the greatest human need was the need for acceptance. And each of these argued that we have these needs that drive us and we're not even aware of them and we can't control them. Now, according to Freud, have you ever heard of somebody being accused of being defensive? You ever heard that term? Quit being defensive. You may not know that, but that is a Freudian term, stolen straight from Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud argued that human beings use these strategies to help them manage the anxiety of these impulses that we have. We have defense mechanisms. So I have this conflict. It gets so bad that I can't manage that conflict. So he argued we then use these conflict managing strategies that we're not even aware of. He called them defense mechanisms. And what you do is you forget your original impulse and you change it into something else. Anybody ever heard of repressed memories? Did you know that's a Freudian term? Freud was the first one that talked about that. He argued that sometimes things happen that are so troubling to your soul that the best thing you can do is forget about them. He called it motivated forgetting. Now here's the deal. They're still there. They're buried deep down and they're affecting you. Exactly. You just don't think about it. He called that the defense mechanism of repression. He argued that that's what human beings do. They're always forgetting what's really bothering them. They're repressing that memory. And then what they do is they do some other defense mechanism to get rid of the anxiety that they're feeling. Has anybody in here ever been accused of cheating by a partner and come to find out that partner was cheating on you? Here comes projection. That's exactly what it is. The guilty person always says you're doing it. According to Freud, they can't deal with that anxiety and they have to yell at somebody. But I can't yell at me, so I'm going to yell at you. You're cheating, you're cheating, you're cheating. And what I'm doing is I'm yelling at myself in the mirror. But I've forgotten that I'm the bad person and I'm pointing it right at you, right? All right. I had a friend, I used to be friends with my old baseball coach. He's my baseball coach in high school. I grew up, I met him, and he was an older fellow. And you know what? When we used to meet at his house, all he would do as a teacher was complain about how sexy you 17-year-old girls dress. Their dresses are so tight, all they're doing, they're showing their breasts and their butt. And all he could do was talk about how angry he was that you ladies were dressing very, very sexy. What's going on here? Boom, that's exactly what it is. It really turns him on, but he's embarrassed to admit it, so he turns it into the exact opposite emotion. He can still get all bent out of shape, but what he's really doing is getting rid of that energy that he has because he really, really feels the attraction towards these females. We often say that about people who are homophobic sometimes. We say they're being homophobic because they're scared of that feeling in themselves, right? And so these are all, if you will, ways of managing anxiety that really, really bothers us. Now here's the crazy thing. According to Freud, everything that's ever been built, every book that's ever been written, every cool thing that's ever been invented, every great thing we've ever done has come because we couldn't have sex, because we couldn't get laid. All right, I couldn't fulfill my sexual impulse, so I'm going to build a submarine. I couldn't fulfill my sexual impulse, so I'm going to write a book. And he argues that one of the ways we deal with this energy, the only socially appropriate way, is we push that energy down and we turn it into something that is acceptable. So maybe your Torrance is a guy with a foot fetish, right? He knows that touching women's feet will get him beat up, right? Can't do that. So you know what he does? He becomes a shoe salesman. Now he can touch feet all day long. It's a part of his job. He sublimated that sexual response. Okay? So, I'm sorry, I've been talking and have not even looked at the live stream. Okay, don't we need 16? We need 16 collaboration points. Yes, I'll talk about that later. Okay? Now, so in a sense, the psychodynamic perspective argues that human beings are born bad, in a sense. We have these desires that aren't necessarily, I won't say bad morally. What is moral, good or bad? But they don't fit in with what society wants. They're selfish, if you will. So he argued that human beings are innately, if you will, animals. Now, think about this. B.F. Skinner and the behaviorists thought that people were animals, well-trained animals. Okay? Sigmund Freud thought that we were uncontrolled animals. Okay? The humanists, on the other hand, said, you know what, we've gone way too far with this idea of human beings are just animals. We are actually different than animals. We have human desires. We have things like hope. We have faith. We have all these great qualities that make us almost angelic, if you will. And so the humanistic perspective arose as a contrast to what Sigmund Freud was doing. And these folks argued that human beings are naturally good. And by naturally good, what I mean to say is you are going to develop into the healthy person that you should be if nobody messes with you. Okay? Here's the deal. If you plant, let's say you plant a pumpkin seed in the ground and you water it, what's that thing going to grow up to be? It's not going to turn into a squash? No, because it has a potential, right? The seeds say that's what it's going to grow into. It's going to grow into a wonderful pumpkin. Now, the only way I can mess that up is if I don't water it, don't give it light, or somehow or another mess with it. But the normal thing is for you to come out right. And so the humanists, especially Carl Rogers, argued the same principle exists for human beings. As long as I give you food and water, you're going to grow 2 arms, 2 legs, hair, eyes. You're going to grow into a natural human being. You have an actualizing potential. He argued the same thing occurred for our personality. Each and every one of us has what he calls a self-actualizing tendency. You are going to grow up and be the human you were meant to be. You are. There's no way, it just has to happen because that's the seeds. And the seeds, if watered properly, will grow up into the right thing, right? You're going to be a pumpkin. So in a sense, the same thing with the self. He argues that human beings have this desire to self-actualize, to become who we really, really want to be. And he argues that, and that's a good thing, he argues the only way that messes up is if people screw us up. All right. Now, whereas the psychodynamic people said conflict is always a part of personality, the humanists would say conflict is not a necessary part of personality. In fact, write that down. That's on your homework. Okay. The humanists do not think that conflict is a natural part of personality. They argue that you're going to grow up to be a normal, happy, healthy person if people will accept you for who you are. Now let me ask you a question. How many of you have disappointed your parents? Anybody ever disappointed your parents? How many of you are disappointing your parents right now with your life choices? Anybody? Okay, right. My dad wanted me to be a soldier. You can be a general. I just didn't have the heart to tell him, I don't play well with others. I'm not a soldier type, but my dad, that's all he said. And then when I told him no, he wanted me to get into AutoCAD, be a computer guy. Oh, computers are the thing. I didn't want to do that either. I wanted to be a psychologist and a teacher. My mom actually before she died, she said psychology was crap. That's what my mom would say. It's a fake science. Thanks for the validation, Mom. All right, this is my life's thing, right? But in a sense, sometimes people don't accept you for who you are, right? Maybe your sexuality doesn't fit what your parents want you to be. Maybe your interests aren't what you want you to be. How many of you did something to make your parents happy when you were growing up and it didn't make them happy, right? Anybody ever had that problem? What he argued is, unfortunately, human beings grow up in a world of what he called conditional positive regard. I'm only going to like you if you make me happy. Okay? So I'm putting you in a little basketball league. If you don't score 12 points in the basketball game, on the way home, I'm going to tell you what a bad person you are, right? I want you to be a great student. If you don't bring home straight A's, I am going to make you feel bad about not getting straight A's. You know, my father used to make me cry in 4th grade because I got straight A's but C's in handwriting. C's in handwriting. And my dad, he was a draftsman, so drawing letters perfectly was his thing. And when I had bad handwriting, he would make me feel horrible. I'm freaking making straight A's, dude. I'm in the 95th percentile. I'm in another math class a year ahead, but I can't freaking write a C the way my dad likes. So he freaking made me feel bad. You know what I mean? And so what happens is, a lot of times what we do is we begin to build a self that makes the people around us happy, but it's not our self. So this is who I want to be. This is who my dad wants to be. So what happens is I start to build a sense of self where this is the me I'm trying to be because my dad wants it. And this is the me that I want to be because that's what I want, right? And what he argues is, when you start to get a difference between these two selves, the one you are and your authentic self, this causes incongruency. And he argued this causes psychological disorders. Well, now, and anxiety, right. Think about, we don't have to do it now, but when I was a kid in high school, if you were gay in high school, you better shut up. Don't you dare freaking tell anybody. Could you imagine living in a world where you couldn't even do that, right? My mom told me if I wore Metallica t-shirts, I was a Satanist. This was back in the 80s. Metallica was dangerous, right? You know what I mean? And so your parents tell you these things, and you wind up growing, become a person to get people to like you, but it's not the real you, all right? And so if you look at this picture over here, we have the person with the incongruent self and the congruent self. And so according to this guy, Carl Rogers, personality problems occurred when there's incongruency between ourselves. And so his job in therapy was to give you a little bit of what he called unconditional positive regard. Whatever you feel, whatever you think, I can understand why you have that feeling. I'm not saying you're right or wrong, but I can understand why you're feeling that way. And when you go to Carl Rogers for therapy, he would never ever give you any advice. It's kind of an annoying way to do therapy. You had to figure out what the right answer was for you. So basically you'd say something to him, well, I'm having this and this. And he'd say, well, I can see that's a big conflict. On the one hand, if you do this, you feel like this is going to happen. But on the other hand, if you do this, you feel like this is going to happen. That must be a tough place to be in. I don't know what I would do, but I'm sure you'll make the right decision. And then you tell it to the doctor again, well, that's something that's very important for you to figure out. And the whole idea is to allow you to understand that who you are, to value yourself, and to have what he called organismic valuing. What I feel is legitimate. My dad used to tell me, oh, you're not angry. He would embarrass the hell out of me. And he would say, you're not embarrassed. How the hell do you know what I feel? Don't tell me what I feel. You know what I mean? And so sometimes people will try to tell you how you feel, how you think, what you believe. And what they're doing is they're pushing a person on you that's not you. Yes, sir?
Is that a level of projection where they're projecting what they want you to be, or what they want to be, onto you?
Probably. That would be good. Although the your therapist, your Rogerian therapist, would tell you it doesn't matter what they think. Don't worry about their projection. It's what you feel. Now, here's the deal. For those of you who want to get a feel for this kind of therapy, I have a link right here. Watch Carl Rogers in a therapy session with a lady named Gloria. And it's a really cornball thing from the 50s and 60s. And she's talking about being uptight because she's single and sexually active. Nobody these days would care about that. But back in 1960, that was if you were female and single and sexually active, oh my God, that was so horrible, right? And so he's helping her deal with the anxiety she feels from wanting to do what is normal and not wanting to make her daughter hate her. She feels like she's locked somewhere in between. And he talks about the important thing for therapy. And really, according to the Rogerian therapist, the most important thing to help you get better is the alliance you have with the therapist. You and I have to feel like we're on the same team. You have to trust me. You have to know I'm not going to judge you. We have to have a feeling of total honesty and authenticity. I don't know if any of you have ever been to therapy, okay? Yeah, I've been married 30 years. You're going to wind up in couples therapy at least once. I'm just telling you, it's going to happen, right? And in a sense, what you have to, where was I going with that point? And one of the things that I found in therapy was we would go to this couple therapist. Oh, it's freaking horrible. I hate this person. And we both knew it. And then we settled on a person that we really, really felt comfortable with. And that's when things got better. Same thing in a therapeutic situation. If you've ever been to a therapist and you don't trust them, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to happen. And Rogers would say that's because you have to have the confidence to feel your authentic self. Okay? So, those two guys were what we represent, the psychodynamic or the humanist perspective. These are the people who ask the question, how does personality occur? Where does it come from? And according to these people, we have these instinctual desires. Freud said instinctually bad. Rogers said instinctually good. But we have these instinctual desires, and they are shaped through dynamic forces in our environment. Now, the second group of people that you're going to find in the personality perspective are what we call the trait people. And these are the people that are developing personality tests. Okay? So, I'm sure all of you have taken a personality test at some point in your life. This is simply a paper and pencil measure designed to give us an idea of what your personality looks like. Now, you can never truly measure personality. Personality is like the wind. You can't see it, you can just feel its effects, okay? I can't see your personality, but I can feel the way you act in a group situation, Torrance. I can't see your personality, I can feel it. And so a personality test, think of a personality test, it's actually like a curtain that's hanging down in front of a window. When the wind blows in and the curtain moves, you can see that personality. A personality test is the same thing. It's like the curtain. I put it in front of you, I let your wind blow on it, and then the shape of the curtain tells me what your personality is. So when you blew the curtain, Logan, your curtain shaped in the introverted way. When Torrance blew his air through the curtain, that personality test showed a different pattern. He was an extroverted person. You can think about a personality test as a way of measuring this tendency that you have. Now, personality tests aren't perfect because, like I said, they're measuring something that's a tendency more than an actual thing we can paint or draw a picture of. Okay. Now, we don't have time to talk about all of these tests, but what I do is I'm only going to talk to you about one test today, and it's actually going to be a test that is no longer used because it's not scientifically valid. So I'm sorry I'm telling you about a test that's not scientifically used anymore, but it represents an interesting way of thinking about the human being, this idea of am I good or am I evil? Now, I know this class, you may think this is a psychology of why German people are not nice class, okay? But I'm going to come back to World War II and the Holocaust again. I don't mean to dump on German people, okay? But if you think about it, 7 million people were killed and a killing machine. Now that machine didn't require one person or 2 people or even 100 people. When you're killing on an industrial scale, it takes thousands of people. It takes a culture. It takes a society, if you will. And thousands of people were involved in the Nazi Holocaust. After it ended, social psychologists became interested in asking the question, what's up with those German people? What's wrong with them? Are they broken somehow? And so this guy, a German psychologist living in California, Theodor Adorno and some of his buddies, tried to develop a personality test so that they could see if there was indeed something wrong with these German people. So they developed the idea of the fascist scale, the California F scale. And this F scale was supposed to measure fascism, a personality style that Adorno and his colleagues thought was endemic somehow to the German culture. So their idea was this whole culture is bad. The whole group of people are screwed up. Now here's the deal. It turns out that the test did not support this assertion. It turns out that there was no Germanic personality trait that caused the Holocaust. However, what they did find was that there is a trait called fascism that affects how people feel about their relationship to authority and their relationship to strong people and weak people. And it was developed, this thing called the California F scale, and it measured authoritarian traits. So do any of you see people who are blindly allegiant to authority? Whatever the cops say is good. Whatever the government says is good. They follow rules, whatever. And if you break the rules, they want to see you punished, not just a little bit. They want to see you whooped and beat, because that's not what you're supposed to do. And these people often tend to think that if you just work hard enough, that the only thing that's stopping you from being successful is how hard you work. And if you work hard, it will always turn out well. And these people who think that we need to worship gods or idols, or that there's some sort of mystical things going on. So what it turned out, this authoritarianism was sort of a personality style or a political orientation where people were really subservient to authority, interested in punishing people who broke rules. They were super duper concerned with what other people did sexually. You ever notice that some people seem to really care who you're sleeping with or what you dress? If Torrance wants to dress like wear a dress, I don't care. It's not my job, right? But some people are really bent out of shape by whether or not he wears boys' curls or girls' clothes. Who the hell cares? Some people do. These authoritarian personality style really does. And so this test was designed to measure sort of this broken quality that German people were said to have. Okay, now the test has been relegated to the dustbin of history. Actually, you know what? No, I'm not going to do it. I've got the test, but I'll let you take it in webinar later tonight. But the idea in the late 40s was that there was something broken about the German people. Now, this test did not demonstrate any national personality style behind the Holocaust. Okay? Some people said, wait a minute, you're not measuring a personality style, you're measuring a political orientation. They may be right. Okay? And it turns out that the items didn't have reverse scored items, okay? Some people always agree with whatever you say. So you have to say something forward and backwards to catch those people. So if I say, hey, are you a friendly person? On a scale of 1 to 6, you'll say, I agree with that, 6. Then I ask you, hey, are you an angry person on a scale of 1 to 6? You'll say, yes, I agree with that too. Some people just agree with whatever you say. So you have to have reverse items to catch those people. This test didn't have that. Okay, so maybe some people just like to agree with the test and they look like fascists, all right? So there were some theoretical problems, there were some technical problems with this test, and it has been relegated to the dustbin of history. Now, why, Chris Roddenberry, do you bother explaining to me a test that is no longer used? And I'm gonna tell you why. Here's the reason. Okay, hold on, let me make sure I don't have any questions. Expectation is the root of all disappointment. As parents, we need to allow our children. Good point. Can I stop for a second? We're talking about acceptance, and Michael Caine, spoken like a father. He said expectation is the root of all disappointment. And one of the things when you become parents, don't have any expectations for your kids. My wife does. My son, she doesn't. I'm not going to put this on YouTube. I take that back. Some people have expectations that cause them to have problems when their kids grow up. Okay, so now why did I tell you about authoritarianism? Because it was believed in the 50s that there was something genetically wrong with German people. They were authoritarian. What? There was something wrong with him. And this guy, Stanley Milgram, also a German Jew, like Adorno and like all of these other social psychologists who became very interested in the Nazi culture in the 40s. Stanley Milgram said, you know what? I'll bet that it really is something different. Actually, let me step back for a second. He came from a social psychological perspective that was interested in what we call social influence. Now, social influence is the power that we have to change each other's behavior. If you're sitting in a group and everybody in that group does something, you know what you're going to do? Probably do what they do. I remember when I did something stupid as a teenager, my dad caught me and he said, well, and I told him, well, all the other boys were doing it. He said, well, if all the other boys jumped off the bridge, would you do it too? The answer is yes, you probably would, okay? Each and everybody would, because of this thing called social influence, all right? Now, social influence is the power that other people have to change our behavior. It's a magical force, but it exists, I promise you. You can't see it, you can't taste it, but it has an impact upon you. It causes us to conform, to be compliant, or to be obedient. They use these three words as if they're somehow different, but basically it's changing the way you think or feel in response to somebody else's desires, social influence. Now, some cool old-timey studies about social influence. In the 1930s, this guy, Muzafer Sherif, a Turkish psychologist, demonstrated this interesting phenomenon, this social phenomenon related to the autokinetic effect. Now, the autokinetic effect is a bizarre sensory experience that we have. If this room was completely pitch black dark, and you saw a light, just one pinpoint of light in that room, because you don't have anything to compare it to, because you don't have any context, that little light is going to move. Your eyeballs are imperceptibly moving, even though you don't know it. Everything looks like it's still because you have points of reference. But if you remove all those points of references, as your head bobs and moves a little bit, that light is going to appear to move. This is called the autokinetic effect. Okay? And it's a common thing that happens when people are put in a situation, a completely black room, and asked to judge a point of light. They will think that that light moves, even if it doesn't move. Now, the crazy thing about the autokinetic effect is people are very different in how much they think that light moves. So, for example, Torrance might think that the light moved just a little bit. On the other hand, Kendall might say, wow, it moved 6 feet. You might say it only moved 6 inches. It looked like it moved 6 feet. And what you're going to find is that everybody experiences the autokinetic effect differently. Now, Muzafer Sherif did this experiment with a group of people, and what he did was he had them come in the first day alone and judge how far they saw the light move. And he got different estimates. And look at the estimates from 3 people. One person in the green didn't think it moved a lot. The other person thought it moved, the person with the blue line thought it moved a ton when they were doing it alone. And then over the next 3 days, they came in and did this judgment, but they did it in the presence of other people who were also making judgments about how far that light moved. Can anybody tell me what happens over time to their judgments of how far that light moved?
As you went farther, like into the green places you want, okay, they met each other. Like it was close together, then it was close together again.
And then even closer, right? Now, they weren't trying to do this. They weren't trying to do this. This was just happening. And so they were hearing the other people, and that was affecting the way they perceived the event. All right? So this is an example of social influence. Now, when this came out, Muzaffar Sharif thought that people were just willing to be pushed around. He thought that people were just willing to be obedient and compliant. And he thought that that was just something that was wrong with people's personality. And this guy, Solomon Asch, said, oh, no. The reason that happens is because it's an ambiguous judgment. You're in a room, you see a point of light. Who knows what the real answer is? In that situation, people are influenced. He said, you know what? If I give people a situation where the right answer is obvious, just freaking obvious, social influence will go away. Okay? So if I gave you an obvious judgment, you're not going to be influenced by these 3 other people. You know what reality is, right? So Solomon Asch did what he called the line judging experiment. And he brought people into the laboratory, and people would come into the laboratory to be in his experiment, and they would see 6 other people who were supposedly supposed to be in the experiment. But what this participant Torrance didn't know was that these other people are secretly working for me. Okay? You're on my team. He doesn't know that. You look like participants, but you're working for me. Now, what I have done is I have told you that every 3rd or 4th judgment, I want you to make a wrong answer, Lelia. Okay? You're going to make the wrong answer. You're going to say the exact same wrong answer. You're going to say the same exact wrong answer. You're going to say the same exact wrong answer. And then we're going to ask Torrance. And what we want to see is, does Torrance give the right answer, or does he give the obviously wrong answer? So, for example, tell me, which of these lines is similar to the reference line? 1, 2, or 3? Can anybody tell me? 2. Clearly 2. Is there even a question about this?
Maybe it's 3.
That's 2. It's 2. But what if Leila says 1, Marianne says 1, Brian says 1, and then the question is, what are you going to say? It turns out that 30% of the time, this Yahoo will give a completely, obviously wrong answer just to be like the other people. Now, how do we know he's not just mistaken? How do we know he's lying? We reran the experiment, and he shows up late for the experiment. We say, you're in the experiment, but since you came late, you're going to write your answers down instead of saying them out loud, okay? And when you let the person answer quietly, you know what happens? They never make a mistake. So clearly, what?
Would it make it seem like humans are lazy then, if they're hearing other people's answer and then give the same answer?
But they
want to think for real?
Well, here's the thing, though. When I let him do it in private and write them down, he gets the right answer.
So I just want to say something at the same time as everybody else for the sake of doing it with everybody else.
Just for the sake of doing it with everybody else, right? So, here's the thing. I want you to think about this. We are influenced by other people. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad. When we're being influenced by other people because we don't know what the right answer is, sometimes we use other people for knowledge. So if all of you walk around, if there's a little puddle, it looks like a really shallow puddle, but all of you carefully walk around that puddle, and I'm walking next, I'm not going to walk through what looks like a shallow puddle because maybe y'all know something. Maybe it's actually a 6-foot pothole and I don't know. So in that sense, I'm using what we would call informational influence. If you've ever been to a situation and you don't know what to do, we look around and judge other people. That's informational influence. On the other hand, sometimes people will be influenced simply because they want to be a part of the group. And that's called normative influence. So there's this magical power that affects all of us. And it affects us sometimes because the world's confusing and we don't know what the right answer is. And sometimes it's because we want to be accepted by a group of people, right? So if I said in here, hey, who thinks that psychology is the best science? Every last one of you better raise your hands, right? Even if you know the right answer, because you want to make me happy. And you're, right? Okay, so that's informational influence. Should we be concerned about the echo chambers many gravitate towards within platforms like Twitter, Facebook, TikTok? Michael Caine wants to talk about the effect that social media has on our behavior. Here's the crazy thing. There's this thing called group polarization. Group polarization, and this is exactly what happens in social media. If you get a group of people together who favor an opinion one way or the other and let them talk for 5 minutes, their opinion will always move more extreme. So if we got together as a group of people and it turns out we're initially kind of liberal, the more we talk, the more we're going to hate Republicans. On the other hand, if we're a bunch of Republicans, moderate Republicans, and we get together and talk for about a half an hour, the more we talk, the more we're going to hate Democrats. So the weird thing is, when a group of people that have a general norm get together and begin talking, what that typically does is that always shifts the opinion in the extreme manner. That's actually in your textbook, but I didn't put it in the lecture today. But a great point, Mike Caine, okay? And so, yes, the echo chambers that we exist in right now, you know how Instagram or Facebook, they know what you like and they begin changing your feed so that you only get what you like. Okay? In a sense, this leads us to these echo chambers where social influence causes us to get even more and more extreme than we really are. Yes, Mike, social media may be the end of civilization. It may be what kills us. Who knows? All right? So this is sort of social influence. Now, here's the thing. Social influence is known to exist, but we were doing lines experiments or judging spots of light, you know. Nobody really thought about that. But then this guy, Stanley Milgram, said, hey, wait a minute. Maybe we can use this to explain the Nazi atrocities. Now, I don't know if any of you, maybe you're not history buffs, but I followed the Nuremberg trials. I've read all about them and whatnot. And you know the most common defense that these people used when they were on trial for their atrocities, you know what they all said? I was just doing my job, man. You can't blame me. I was told by my superior, that's why I did this, all right? And so they used this excuse. Now, I will tell you that this excuse was roundly rejected in Nuremberg, and a lot of Nazis hung despite their insistence that they were only following orders. But this guy, Stanley Milgram, said, maybe that is the truth. And so he set up an experiment to see if normal, everyday, average people could be coerced into engaging in violent, dangerous behavior. All right? And so he did the famous shock experiment study that you see right here. So he brings people into the laboratory. Torrance and Lelia show up in my laboratory. Boom, they're sitting right here. Now, Torrance doesn't know, but Lelia's working with me. She's on my team. But she pretends to be a participant. And I said, hey, we're getting ready to do a cool experiment. There's this thing called positive reinforcement and punishment. You guys have heard of that stuff, real popular back in the 60s. What we want to do is we want to study the effect of punishment on people's memory. So we're going to do a memory test, and every time you make a mistake, we're going to punish you with a little bit of electricity. Now, what I need to do is one of you needs to be the learner, and one of you needs to be the teacher. So I have 2 slips of paper. One of them says learner and one of them says teacher. And I'm going to have you pick them, right? Now here's the deal. Both of these pieces of paper say learner. Both of them say learner. So you pick a piece of paper and you pick a piece of paper. All right? You read your paper. What does it say? Learner. And you read your paper and you lie. What does it say? Teacher. Because she's working for me. Or no, I take that back. You get the teacher, you get the learner. Oh,
Teacher.
Yes, you get the teacher and you get the learner. Right, they both say teacher. Okay, so I then put my learner right here in this chair. I hook her up to a bunch of electrodes that are going to shock her. And just to say, hey, Torrance, this is the shock we're going to be giving her. I'm actually going to shock him one time and give him a real shock so it hurts. Then I'm going to put him in this room right here, and I'm going to put Leela in this room, and she's hooked up to these electrodes that are going to shock her. Now, there are no windows here. Okay, no windows. So he doesn't know what's going on in here. So as soon as we close the door, she gets up and leaves if she wants, right? And we've got a tape recording of her complaining and crying and whining when we start to shock her. And so he starts to do this experiment, and he's given a shock board, and he says every time she makes a mistake, we're going to give her a shock by flipping a switch. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is every time she makes a mistake, we're going to increase the amplitude of the shock. And I'm going to show you this board. And you see it says slight shock down here, moderate, strong shock, very strong shock. And then right here, it says extremely, the picture was cut off, extreme shock, and it's going to be 3 X's, dangerous, and it's red. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shock you down here. And it's actually going to give you a pretty good jolt. So you're going to imagine what it feels like up here. And we're going to set the experiment up so that Lelia makes enough mistakes that we have to go all the way up this board. And the question is, how far will he go? Now, we set the experiment so that Lelia starts complaining, ow, this hurts, let me out of here. And I say, now, I told you at the beginning, these shocks are going to be painful, but they're not going to hurt you. Okay? I'm not letting her out. Ow, quit it. And it's going to keep going up. Ow, my heart, I'm having heart trouble here. You must continue the experiment. Right up about here, Leela's going to quit responding altogether. Something bad's going on in that room. And the question is, and I tell him, no answer is a wrong answer, so keep on shocking. And the question is, will he go up and shock her all the way? Now, they talked to psychologists, sociologists, clinical psychologists in the 60s before they ran this experiment and said, who's going to go all the way up to the extreme level? Now, based upon what we believed about people's fascist personalities and the fact that people were born with evil in them, the idea was most psychologists said 1 or 2% of the people will go all the way up, those sociopaths that are killers anyhow. Only the sociopaths will do it. So they did this experiment, and it turns out that 67% of the people who were the teachers in this experiment shocked all the way up to XXX. Now, they were uncomfortable. Clearly, they were uncomfortable. And they set it up so that the experimenter, me, right here, I can say 3 things. And I get to argue with you 3 times. If you continue to complain after the 3rd one, then we stop the experiment. So when you say, I can't do this, I say, Torrance, you must continue. If he says it again, I say, Torrance, the experiment requires that you continue. Okay, right. And you must continue. So I say that 3 times. I never threaten you. I just say the experiment requires that you continue. Nobody's going to get hurt. And it turns out that 2/3 of the people were willing to do this based upon a dude in a white lab coat telling them that it was okay. Now, this person hasn't talked. You could have killed her, man. But you're listening to me. It's going to be okay. Right. And in fact, people like Torrance would go, are you sure this is your decision here? What kind of thing is that to say, right? Stand up and do the right thing. But people didn't. 2/3 of them did this. Now, he found that things would affect this. If the experimenter was sitting in a different room, people would quit. If the experimenter had an assistant that he put in the chair and then left, people wouldn't do it as much. But as long as there was a full-fledged authority sitting close to people, people would actually kill another person, so to speak. And so this guy, Stanley Milgram, argued that we all have the capacity for evil. We're good people, but situations can sometimes make us evil because of this stuff called social pressure. All right? So, are you a good person? Are you a bad person? Depends on the situation, my friend. It depends on the situation. Just keep in mind, we all have the ability to be evil in the right situation under the right set of circumstances. Now, this guy, Phil Zimbardo, in Stanford, in the early 70s, there was Attica prison riots. There were lots of social upheaval occurring in our society, and especially around prison and prison reform, and etc. And he wanted to rerun this experiment to see if he could use a situation to create a situation in people where people would lose their morals and behave differently. So he created what became known as the Stanford Prison Experiment. So he converted the basement of the psych lab into a prison, a mock prison. Then he went out and he found he actually put an ad in the paper, who wants to be involved in a 2-week psychology study that pays $15 a day. Back in 1970, $15 was some cash, man. All right? And so he recruited 18 males. Now, they did personality tests and background checks to make sure that none of these people had criminal backgrounds, none of these people had psychological problems or any other medical problems which might affect their response. He picked 18 normal, healthy young men. He then used random assignment to pick 9 of them to be prisoners and 9 of them to be prison guards. All right? Now, the prisoners, he actually had the local police come and arrest them on a Saturday morning. They actually got the police department to help, and they came and arrest these 9 guys. 4 of them they arrested for burglary. 5 of them they were arrested for armed robbery. And they showed up, knocked on their door, frisked them, put them in cuffs, and led them to the psych department, just like they were prisoners. Now, the other 9 guys, he gave them sunglasses and brown uniforms and he didn't give them a lot of training. He said, look, here's your job. Maintain control. Don't let the prisoners escape. That's really their prisoner training. And then what he wanted to do was to see what's going to happen over the course of 2 weeks. How into these roles of being prisoners or guards will these people become? Now, the deal is he actually had to stop the experiment after 6 days. He didn't even get the full 2 weeks because the guards started sexually abusing the prisoners. They actually started abusing the prisoners. Now, they had the Stanford prison rules. These guys were only allowed to call themselves by their numbers. They all got numbers, and so they came up with a set of rules. But the prisoners started developing personality or psychological problems, but none of the prisoners asked to leave the experiment. They actually forgot that they could leave the experiment. And the guards started abusing them, sexually abusing them. In fact, there's some video. You can go online. It's not worth your looking. But there's actually a scene where the guards are making them play The Bride of Frankenstein, kiss each other. And they're making these prisoners engage in semi-sexual behavior. It's bizarro. Now, this experiment demonstrated furthermore the power of the situation, and it made Phil Zimbardo the richest psychologist around because he made a ton. He got super duper famous off of this study. And what he found was that people could sometimes be caused to take on a role in a situation and lose their sense of morality. Now, when I read about the Phil Zimbardo study, I thought it was the most ridiculous thing. And I said, you know what? A lot of the criticism in the 70s was, you know what? Those people all knew they were in a prison study. It was what we call demand characteristics. I made you a prison guard, and so the demand characteristic, you think, oh, he wants me to abuse these prisoners. That's what he's interested in, right? And so I thought it was kind of fake, and there's no way real people would engage in this. I don't know if any of you heard of the Abu Ghraib prison in the first Gulf War, okay? In the first Gulf War, they actually set some soldiers up. What are those people that part-time soldiers, the what? The reserves. So the reserves were over there, and this is actually a picture from the Abu Ghraib prison. They had this person standing up here with a hat on, dressed like a freaking idiot. They had pictures of naked prisoners making a big triangle. They were all naked, balanced on each other, making one of those sort of cheerleading. And it was just the most bizarre crap I've ever seen. And so what we find is that the right situation can make anybody a killer or an attacker or a sexist or anything. So it's all about the power of the situation. I am sorry for running my mouth for so long. Bystander apathy. You know what? Sometimes if there are other people around, people are less likely to help you if there are other people around. Did you know that? It's called bystander apathy. Yep, read about that. And they did a bunch of experiments, and here's a video of a lady. She's in a room, and smoke is pouring in through a door. She's in an experimental room. Guess how long it takes for this lady to get up and check to see what's on fire on the other side of that door. It will absolutely shock you. All right, I am sorry for talking too long and spending too much time today, but I want to thank everybody for coming. If you come to webinar on Thursday night, we've got some really cool videos about infant morality. How young do children know right from wrong? Is it 2 months, 3 months, 6 months of age? And take care. See you later. Yeah, I got you. All right, but I hope to see everybody on Thursday night. Take care. Have a great day. All right, folks. Well, thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate having you in my class. Hey, take care, man. See you later. Bye, y'all. Thanks for coming. Y'all have a great day. I hope to see you in webinar on Thursday night. Take care. Bye. I got you.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha. Yep. Gotcha.
Is there like any benefit to doing any more than for writing assignments or doing any more than like, because I'll always attend the webinars because I like them, but like is there any reason that I should continue to do the discussion boards and whatnot? Because I'll probably still do them, but just other than my own benefit of
exactly.
them, is there anything else or no?
Yes, ma'am?
I was to ask about the writing paper 3. You said schedule a meeting or something?
Yeah. Are you around tonight? Can you do a web meeting tonight? Send me an email when you can meet. Okay. I got class from 6 to 7 online, but anytime today or tomorrow, let's spend 10 minutes and I'll tell you what I'd like to see. Okay?
But there's no benefits, just for your own personal gain.
Yeah, and that was one of the things when I set up this class, I realized that at some point a student would be able to check out if they worked really hard. And so I may have to adjust that to make them work a little bit harder. So that's why I started with 18 discussion points and then moved it to 16. I was like, fuck, 18's too many. So
you don't want to kill one student with a lot. Yeah, I'll continue because I love the webinars and I enjoy that. I'll do this discussion posted as well because I thought it was interesting.
Okay.
So I'll continue to do them, but I was just curious if there was any
No.
benefit other than my own
No,
interaction.
other than you're just a cool student.
Shucks.
The
Very much.
the only thing I do really want to do, I really want you to do, is the final discussion board activity is actually the course evaluation. And I'm really hoping to get 100% on the course evaluation. So if you could do that.
Yeah, okay. So there's a course evaluation at the end.
Yeah, and I waited for the last week and I realized, shit, people who have enough points aren't going to have to fill out the questionnaire. But it's my hope that people like you who've,
Because that helps you out, right?
yeah, my boss wants at least 75% to respond.
I got you.